Republicans have this dream of making the general election about one particular issue, a few, but making the most important issue in the minds of American voters something that is clearly not the most important given this moment. So they want it to be all about Joe Biden's age. How many years has it been since Joe Biden was born? That's the thing everyone should think about 24/7, according to Republicans and some other people across the political spectrum that have taken issue with. Not the fact that Donald Trump would quite literally end democracy if he got a second term, the fact that he wants to govern as an authoritarian, the fact that Republicans have been and will continue to take away the rights of women, refuse to do anything to act on the issue of gun violence, have a horrible record on the economy compared to the very strong record of Democrats and specifically Joe Biden. And just on all these issues, Republicans are losing, so they want to make it about something else. And that something else is often Joe Biden's age. That's their dream. Please focus on this, not anything else. Not the fact that Donald Trump's a civilly liable rapist. And Gavin Newsom decided on Meet the Press yesterday that he was going to crush Republicans' hopes and dreams on that front and delivered a very effective message on that subject about Joe Biden's age that I think other Democrats need to make sure to emulate. And we'll talk about that more after playing this.
You think it's responsible for Democrats to put him at the top of the ticket given those concerns?
Responsible? I revere his record. I mean, what he's done in 3 years has been a masterclass, close to 15 million jobs. That's 8 times more than the last 3 Republican presidents combined. The economy is booming. Inflation is cooling. It's 0.6% more than it was in the summer of 2020 at just 3.1%. Wait a second. We have American manufacturing coming back home, all because of Biden's wisdom, because of his temperance, his capacity to lead in a bipartisan manner, which is an underrepresented point. And so I have great confidence moving forward. So the answer is absolutely all in terms of the next 4 years of Joe Biden.
These voters, though, are not complaining about his record. They're talking about concerns about his ability to beat Trump, who you've called a threat, essentially, to the democracy. But in private, we've heard a lot of his allies say publicly, in private, he is strong. He's in command. Yeah. He's forceful. Does he need to do more to show?
I think he's doing everything he needs to do. I mean, he's got an extraordinary record. He's doing everything he needs to do on Ukraine at the moment. He's doing everything he needs to do to reconcile and wrestle some common sense as it relates to a bipartisan approach to address the issue of the border, where the Republicans couldn't take yes for an answer because they don't want to make that a political issue. He is leading. And so, no, from my humble perspective, not only the last 3 years have been extraordinary. I've been out with, as you know, on the campaign trail. I was just out in California. I've seen him up close. I've seen him from far. But here's my point. It's because of his age that he's been so successful. It's because of the wisdom and the character that's developed over years that we have the CHIPS and Science Act, the Infrastructure Bill, and the PACT Act, and the Safer Communities Act. And because we've seen these bipartisan accomplishments,
And that's it. That's what it needs to be. I've heard something to the effect of, from Democrats in the past, Joe Biden's record's strong, essentially despite his age. But it's strong because of his age. The experience, wisdom, relationships that took place during that span of time, that's what, in part, is responsible for this sort of long list of achievements, this sort of record. And that, I think, is a really compelling way to articulate it. It's that knowledge that allowed for him to oversee this sort of economic recovery, 14+ million jobs, stronger job growth after we recovered all pre-pandemic jobs than we saw under Donald Trump, stronger wage growth adjusted for inflation taking place right now than we saw under Donald Trump, the unemployment lower for longer than we've seen in 50 years, sub 4% for 2 straight years. Being in that economic place after just a few short years, after Biden took over an economic, social, and public health crisis, that is significant. And in part, it's because of all those years of experience he had going into that place. And so pointing that out, I think, is a really interesting way to present it, as Gavin Newsom did there. I have another clip to play for you, but to finish out on responding to the first, the other thing is, the reason why I'm so bothered by the media's coverage of Joe Biden's age is not, as I've been saying, because it's unreasonable to ever discuss or that people aren't actually concerned with it. Clearly people are. But it's that I think the media has a responsibility to give proportional coverage to subjects based on their importance in people's lives, in the viewers' lives. And so if we know for sure, I don't think anyone would argue with me on this, that the policies that impact millions of people and their material well-being are more important than Joe Biden's age, then why is it that we never seem to talk about those things, at least in mainstream media, obviously on right-wing media? Those seem to go by the wayside. Instead, we're talking about Joe Biden's age around the clock. Not to mention the fact that Donald Trump poses an existential threat to our democracy. So you have this existential threat on one end, then a presidency that's been one of the most successful we've seen in modern American history. But on this side, we're just talking about how many years it's been since he was born. What? That doesn't make sense. Things like the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure law, clean and reliable drinking water for people who didn't have it, broadband going into communities, record investment in green energy, Medicare negotiating drug prices, veterans having health care who didn't before, unions being stronger because of Biden's NLRB, etc. Those things mean more in people's lives than Joe Biden having a gaffe here or there. And that's what I think is messed up about this coverage. It's not that you should purposefully avoid things that you should be talking about to help the candidate that you know would be better. It's that you have a responsibility to put emphasis on things that justify emphasis. And right now we're overemphasizing something that doesn't justify it because it doesn't impact people's lives as much as all these other things. And within the conversation of his age, why not throw in? Sure, there's been a lot of years since he was born, but could that be in part why post this crisis we've seen such a strong record under this presidency? Could that be in part a reason that we could give credit to? Here's more from Gavin Newsom.
Let's talk about you, Governor. Days after that special counsel report came out questioning the president's age and his memory, the Washington Post reported that anxious Democrats reached out to top Biden donors to ask, quote, when is Gavin getting in? Or how about Whitmer or Shapiro? The buzz has not stopped. I know you've been asked this before, but do you still rule out a run in 2024?
You got to be kidding. I am here celebrating the extraordinary accomplishments of the Biden-Harris administration, making the case that we need to make to lift up the issues, lift up the record, drive contrast with the Republican nominee to be Donald Trump, so that we can win for 4 more years.
Have you gotten any calls, Governor, encouraging you to run?
It's all idle chatter. It's all you know what? That's a sideshow. I think what Democrats need to do is worry less, do more, continue to overperform as we have, continue to win, make the case. Don't be ashamed of 4.1% GDP over the last 2 quarters. Don't be ashamed about the alliance management of the Biden-Harris administration. Don't be timid about making the case for the record of this administration.
So you're ruling it out 100%.
I mean, it's not even an interesting conversation.
Okay.
And by the way, I think it's a damning conversation, frankly, the other side wants us to have. And trust me, I know the mishigash coming from the other side. I'm deeply mindful of the anger machine and all the entertainment industry out there on Fox and elsewhere that love ginning this stuff up. At the end of the day, not only has this train left the station, but we get to enjoy a record of accomplishments as we make the case in a re-election, the likes of which we couldn't have even dreamt of, even as a Democrat.
It is a little bit of, in terms of the media coverage, a chicken or the egg thing. And the answer is both, a little bit of both. Meaning, people show concern about a subject, so the media covers it, so they show more concern, so the media covers it more. And I find it hilarious that people pretend like there's none of that going on. It's funny that people genuinely ignore the influence of media in a lot of ways. And if just a little bit of better coverage was happening, and if advocates for a second Biden term would just be a little bit more aggressive, as Gavin Newsom is there, about saying, wait, we can talk about whatever we want to talk about, but can I just say I find it way more important in your life, these policies that have been implemented. Don't you agree? isn't that, and maybe could your concern be on a very subject that plays a little bit into why that list of achievements is so long? And if more people were doing that more effectively, and if the media would balance a little bit more talking about the threat that Trump poses to democracy and Biden's age, and just occasionally mention that he's been the most successful president in decades, then you would see people's opinions change. And the way I know that for certain is that we've looked at polling in the past of you poll people on how they approve or if they approve of Joe Biden's presidency. It's pretty low, as we see consistently. Then you walk them through the policies that Joe Biden has signed into law, and it jumps up. So there's a lack of understanding and knowledge about Joe Biden's presidency. And I don't blame people for that, because for this job, I watch a lot of cable news, and even on networks that are accused of being too liberal, you just see an absence of meaningful policy discussions about what he's actually doing day to day, what he's actually getting done. And then Joe Biden has this sort of govern quietly mentality, which I don't think he should, where he just does things quietly in the background, record student debt relief, whatever, and doesn't tout his successes enough. But the jobs that people have because of the American Rescue Plan or Chips and Science Act or whatever that allows them to provide for their family now, that matters a lot more than some clip circulating of Biden having a gaffe. And it's so important we call that out. Just quickly, because we're on the subject of Meet the Press a little bit with that interview, here's just a random moment I wanted to discuss. I didn't know where to put it, so I'm putting it here.
Congressman, just yes or no, and of course the Biden administration's working on executive actions as we speak, but just yes or no, would you vote to shut down the government if you did not see a border security plan in the package? Just yes or no.
I will not be voting for any funding if the border is not secured.
Okay.
Anything I vote for has to secure our border, and the president should agree to that. That's simple.
He opposed. Him. Republican Representative Byron Donalds opposed the border bill that Border Patrol said was the best thing they've seen in a super long time, and we're begging Republicans to support. What? I called it too. I said, right now they're saying they won't support Ukraine because of the border, even though they blocked action on the border. Because they're saying we have to secure our border before we secure Ukraine's or whatever. But again, they're the ones opposing doing anything on the border because they want to hurt Biden politically. And now it seems like just general government funding he's going to oppose. Which I said, they're just going to start opposing everything and say it's because of the border, even though they blocked the thing on the border. It's crazy. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel.